This is not a strike that has already happened. It is a blueprint for the next one. Ukraine is quietly preparing. And if it works, no capital on the map will feel untouchable again. Under a cold, gray daylight sky over central Moscow, a Ukrainian Leute long-range strike UAV, valued at roughly $200,000, skims in at barely 30 meters above the rooftops. It slips toward a cluster of government towers from a blind southern corridor. Below, a palm-sized UGV scout robot, worth about $15,000, crawls through alleys and service roads. It feeds live imagery and marks narrow wind tunnels between glass skyscrapers. This is not a noisy raid. It is a surgical intrusion designed to prove one chilling point, that Russia's so-called steel ring is not impenetrable, and the city does not see it coming. Where are you watching from on the world map today as these events unfold? Please comment your location. If you watched our previous video on Ukraine's fiber optic drones hitting a weapons depot, this phase is the next evolution of that same playbook, just scaled up for a capital city. From the opposite edge of the city, the trap is sprung. A swarm of Rubaka decoy UAVs, each worth barely $15,000, surges into Moscow's airspace in a loose V-shaped formation. They broadcast radar signatures inflated to resemble heavy manned aircraft. On Russian scopes, it looks like a full-scale aerial incursion. Operators tense, radars snap to life. Search beams sweep the skyline. Within seconds, multiple Pantsir S1 batteries pivot their turrets skyward, locking on to the loudest ghost in the sky. Missiles peel off their rails. Tracer fire claws upward, shredding the air over empty intersections and office blocks. The decoys do exactly what they were built to do: die loudly and expensively. One after another, they blossom into fireballs, convincing Russian commanders that they are winning a textbook interception. But while every radar dish and gun barrel is pointed the wrong way, the real weapon is already inside the city. The Leute strike drone, still hugging the terrain at under 30 meters, maintains total radio silence. No emissions, no GPS, no chatter. It slides between glass towers and concrete blocks like a shadow slipping through cracks in a wall. Urban clutter bends radar beams away from its fuselage. Reflections from windows and steel frames fracture its signature into meaningless noise. Below, the tiny UGV scout robot continues feeding the Leute's flight computer a live stream of alleyways and service corridors, confirming which routes remain invisible to ground-based sensors. Every decoy that explodes above buys the Leute another few precious seconds of invisibility below. This is not brute force, it is choreography. A high-speed shell game played across a city of 12 million people. Russia's air defense network is burning through million-dollar interceptors to kill flying scrap plastic, while the real strike asset glides untouched through the urban canyon. By the time commanders realize what has happened, the decisive piece will be past their last clean line of sight. Ukraine's drone mission isn't complete yet. Comment 1 to send your support to Ukraine. While Russian commanders are still congratulating themselves, the second layer of the trap snaps shut. 30 miles outside the city, a mobile Ukrainian electronic warfare team powers up a broadband jamming rig valued at $3 million. Within seconds, a dirty wall of noise floods the spectrum over Moscow. GPS signals flicker and vanish. Data links between radar nodes stutter. Fire control computers start throwing mismatched tracks and ghost coordinates. But inside the urban canyon, the Leute strike UAV does not care. The moment its satellite link drops, its onboard AI pivots to optical navigation. Instead of coordinates, it reads landmarks, window grids, and rooftop HVAC units. It cross-matches the real-time video feed with a preloaded 3D city map stored on its internal drive. Moscow becomes a visual puzzle, and the drone solves it at 27 meters per second. It corrects its course by inches as it weaves between towers. Below, 3 UGV scout robots fan out through parking garages and maintenance corridors. Their cameras catch something critical: a Pantsir battery that quietly relocated for refueling, leaving a temporary radar shadow 400 meters wide. The UGVs transmit the coordinates in a compressed burst that slips through the jamming haze just long enough to register. The Leute banks hard and drops lower, slipping directly into the blind wedge. For 12 precious seconds, it is functionally invisible. No clean radar line of sight, no GPS dependency, and no live control link to sever. Just inertial guidance, machine vision, and a shrinking corridor of opportunity. This is where the architecture of Russian air defense finally collapses. Expensive sensors without clean data become liabilities. Interceptors without accurate tracks become theater. The city's defensive map is no longer a map at all. It is a hallucination. And the real strike asset is now inside the last layer of cover. Untouched, unseen, and accelerating toward the heart of the capital. The moment the radar shadow collapses behind it, the Leute commits to the most dangerous phase. It drops hard, slipping below the roofline at barely 24 meters above the streets, trading open sky for a razor-thin corridor of glass, steel, and concrete. The skyline vanishes from its sensors. From a secondary vector a mile to the west, 6 small loitering munitions dive into the urban airspace. Each one is barely the size of a suitcase, cheap enough to be expendable and loud enough to be impossible to ignore. Their job is to be seen. They flare their engines and deliberately expose themselves to optical sensors and short-range radars. The Russian response is immediate and predictable. A pair of Pantsir units swing their turrets away from the city center. Cannons bark as tracer rounds rip into the air. One loitering munition detonates over a parking structure. Another vanishes in a burst of debris above a warehouse roof. Operators call out multiple inbound tracks, believing this swarm is the main strike package. They split their attention. They split their fire. And that is the opening the Leute was waiting for. This is the pivot point of the entire operation. From here on, raw explosive power takes a backseat to software and split-second decision-making. Russia still has guns, missiles, and numbers. But down here, below the horizon of its own systems, the fight is no longer decided by hardware. It is decided by who can think faster than the city itself. The decoys are still dying loudly in the distance when the real break in the defense finally appears. As Russian operators stay locked onto false targets, the Leute executes a move no human pilot would dare. It snaps into a sudden 40-degree bank and dives toward a narrow seam between 2 government buildings. From the ground, a UGV scout robot pushes out its final data burst. Its cameras have confirmed what Ukrainian planners were praying for: a temporary radar-clean corridor, open for less than 30 seconds, created by the overlapping blind zones of 2 repositioned units. It is not a gap you could see from a satellite or predict on paper. It only exists in this exact moment, at this exact angle, inside this exact canyon of steel and glass. The Leute commits instantly, no hesitation, no course correction delay. It surges forward at nearly 180 miles per hour, flattening its profile and squeezing into the slot like a thrown knife. Windows flash past its sensors in a blur. Streetlights streak beneath its wings. The onboard AI is no longer optimizing for safety. It is optimizing for survival. Every control input is calculated to the millisecond with ruthless efficiency. Behind it, Russian firepower is still roaring in the wrong direction. Cannons rake the sky where decoys were moments ago. Missiles arc upward, searching for targets that no longer exist. Operators shout conflicting track numbers, unaware that the real threat has just slipped through the last line of defense. For 12 critical seconds, the Leute is functionally untouchable. No radar has a clean angle. No interceptor can dive fast enough into the urban slot. The drone is now inside the defensive lattice, not just beneath it. The UGV signal cuts out as its battery dies, but its job is done. The corridor remains clean just long enough for the Leute to burst through the far end, emerging into a new pocket of airspace, directly aligned with the inner administrative district. This is the snap point. The instant when Russia's layered defense stops being a net and starts being a maze.
This is the heart of the administrative district.
Everything before this was
nation's
preparation.
business is conducted.
Everything after this is impact physics. The strike asset is no longer probing the perimeter. It is now behind it. The The path to the target is real, it is open, and it is shrinking by the second. The instant the Leute bursts out of the urban canyon, the city seems to exhale, and then everything explodes into motion. It climbs sharply, clearing the last line of apartment blocks. Dead ahead, the government tower dominates the skyline like a vertical target board. The final approach window has begun. Russian air defense reacts, but it reacts late. Radar operators are still wrestling with desynced tracks. A surviving decoy UAV drags one Pantsir turret off target at the worst possible second. An optical sensor latches onto a phantom reflection off a mirrored office facade. The defense grid finally sees the intruder, but the Leute is already inside minimum engagement range. Missiles launch anyway. Two contrails rip upward from a courtyard battery, streaking toward where the drone was 3 seconds ago. The Leute does not swerve wildly. It does not waste energy. Its inertial navigation system holds a brutally stable line while the machine vision module takes over. The drone's camera locks onto the facade of the tower, isolating structural seams against its 3D model. A third missile detonates too far behind to matter. Cannon fire opens up, a ragged wall of tracers climbing toward the sky. But the geometry is all wrong.
Complete.
The drone is descending too steeply.
The build is perfectly
the background is
aligned
too
with
cluttered.
the 3D model.
The fire control solution never quite converges. For the first time, the Leute is no longer hiding. It is charging straight down the throat of the capital's inner defense ring, guided by nothing but inertial maths, optical certainty, and a pre-programmed refusal to miss. What happens next is more than broken glass and scorched concrete. The real damage unfolds on Russian command screens. Within hours, air defense units are pulled from the front lines and rushed into the central ring. The perimeter thickens, but the message has already landed. This wasn't a saturation attack, it was a demonstration. A proof of concept strike designed to rewrite Russian threat perception overnight. Victory is not measured in square footage destroyed. It is measured in how many new red circles now appear on Russia's defense map, and how many frontline sectors just lost the systems they needed for protection. Moscow settles into a new normal: permanent alert. Expensive interceptors are burned daily just to keep nerves calm. What Phase 4 hinted at is now undeniable. Cheap drones, AI navigation, and urban deception can punch through systems that cost billions. So here's the question hanging in the air. If one Leute could do this today, how many other power centers will wake up tomorrow in a permanent state of readiness? And when price tags no longer equal protection, which side of deterrence actually gets stronger?